Thank you, David. And now, Nigel Hughes.
Good evening, everybody. Forgive me, I think you can hear me. We'll use the mic. Thank you so much for coming out. Friday evening, Hurricane just passed, so really appreciate it. I just wanted to say thanks to Larry, Melina, the whole squad that put this together tonight.
And George.
George, how could I forget? And happy birthday. Okay. And the man with the cohibas, thank you, sir. Okay. We have some painful truths about the history of our history collectively as Guyanese that I'm going to touch on. But I want to start off by saying, never before in the history of our country, as an independent country, and certainly at the time of our foreparents, when they got here in 1625, have we ever had the resources to be able to realize the dreams and aspirations of any of those generations. Never had it. For the first time since we've discovered oil, we have it. The problem is we don't have the benefit of the knowledge and the experience of all those foreparents that we have in relation to how we can make this together. So, take for example, 1976, the President announced, or the Prime Minister at the time, Feed Global House, which was really food security, housing, and feeding, housing, and clothing ourselves. We now have the resources. The problem is, how are we going to manage those resources for the benefit of all of us? You here represent the best of Guyana that is not in Guyana. We have lost, whether you call it the middle class, whether you call it the thinking class, and in the last 10, 15 years, we have been losing graduates at the rate of 85% of the graduates of the University of Guyana end up out of Guyana in under 3 years. You can't run a country if you are bleeding and hemorrhaging your best and brightest. Let's start off by that definition. You just cannot run a country that way.
Sir, say that again.
The numbers?
You cannot run a country.
You can't run a country. It's a fact. You can't run a country if your best and brightest here. I mean, I just have to look in this audience and see people that went to school with me. We had 5, 6 top schools. If you ask anybody, if I ask Sammy, if I ask anybody, how many of the people in your class are actually in Guyana, you'd probably say 3 out of 30 or 3 out of 28. So we have the resources. The question is, how do we build a modern, equitable country in which all of us get a chance to share in those resources, but more importantly, that we responsibly manage the resources going forward? Because that's really the key. How do we manage them? The good thing these days is that you don't have to have all those resources in country. You can hire the experts to advise you on how you do it. And there's some pretty startling statistics that I want to share with you. 50% of school children who enter secondary school are not competing. We just came back from a visit to Region 9, largest geographic region, indigenous region in Guyana, down south, bordering Brazil. 6% of the students, secondary school students in Region 9, Rupununi, matriculated. That means 94% of the students who went to school from 1st to 5th form in Region 9 are leaving school without a single certification. None. Nothing. The International Labour Organization says that we're going to need somewhere between 8,000 to 10,000 jobs over the next 4 years. And those jobs are going to be skilled and semi-skilled. That's where those jobs are going to be, because it's the oil industry. If you're losing 50% of your students who can't finish secondary school, and in Region 9, only 94%, well not only, 94% are not even matriculating, those jobs in the oil industry have to be filled. It's not maybe filled, because the oil industry is a 24/7, 365-day operation. So the oil industry is not going to shut down and wait for Guyana to have qualified people to be employed. So the jobs are going to be filled, the semi-skilled and skilled jobs are going to be filled by people who are not Guyanese. They're going to have to just import the labor. And it doesn't take much to understand the social problems that will come. So the 1 in 2 students doesn't finish secondary school, does not have a ghost chance in hell of ever matriculating to be able to get a job in the new industry. Neither will he have the qualifications to open a business that can supply the services that the oil industry require. So what's going to happen to them? They're going to see non-Guyanese driving around, if they live in the capital of the coast, every day, better cars, going to fancy restaurants, while they, because of their circumstances, cannot do better. I'm sure you can think of many countries in the world where that happens and you know what the consequences are. It's going to be critical. You would have thought that if you have a statistic, and that statistic of 1 in 2 is the Ministry of Education statistic published in 2022. And I'll tell you about that here in a minute. You would have thought that if you realize that you're hemorrhaging 50% of your students, you would do, or at least create, some sort of voluntary national service in which people can go and get trained and get qualified in 6 months in the appropriate fields, so that at least those that have fallen through the 5 years can get vocational training that will allow them to gather the skills to work and survive and thrive in a modern society. That's not happening. People leave school and that's it. There is no provision for that vocational training afterwards. Here is a very, very disturbing statistic. Ministry of Education again. 2022, Guyana topped the Caribbean because we have students to do 24 subjects at one sitting. Unheard of in any other Caribbean country, and I really mean that. There is no other Caribbean country that says to their students, sit 24 subjects. Because it speaks a lot of the breadth of the training that is available. If you're doing 24 subjects, you're clearly not doing anything else in your school life. You're clearly going to extra lessons at 5:30 in the morning, and you're going to school, and then you're going back to extra lessons. So you don't have cricket, football, ballet, whatever else. But be that as it is. So in 2022, Guyana topped the Caribbean because we had students that sat 24, 26 subjects, not 24 A's, 2 B's, and we did remarkably well because nobody else in the Caribbean has that number of students, or any students doing that number. In the same year, 2022, in the indigenous and hinterland community, which is code for the indigenous community, not a single indigenous person got one A. So there you are on the coast, 24 A's, and in the entire indigenous community, nobody can get one. That is institutionalized educational apartheid. That has never happened before. So the question is, and I don't want to speak about the woes, I want to speak about the solutions, because I know we got to get out of here just now, but I want to speak about the solutions. The Alliance for Change says, look, there are 5 critical areas for the development of the country that we should have 15 to 20 year plans, which should enjoy across the board political support. In other words, all the political parties get together, put their best brains, and those 5 areas are: 1, the economy; 2, education; 3, health; 4, the border, because we have a vulnerable border in the west, and we still have problems with Suriname in the east and the New River Triangle; and 5, reduction of poverty. And the reason we want 15-year cycles for development is, and across political parties, is because irrespective of what happens at every election, you don't want to change in the system. You don't want to wholesale change in the economic direction because you vote a different party. You don't want to wholesale change in your educational system because another party comes in and decides their supporters have to get the best of the education. Let's agree this across the board. And we can argue about everything else. When we made that proposal 2.5 months ago, the People's Progressive Party said that we were trying to steal their ideas. And our colleague opposition party said that they weren't interested in it because they didn't think the PPP would back it. We are a minuscule sized country, minuscule, with more resources than we have ever managed. And one of the most important things, when we didn't have money, we had a state planning institute. Because it was important that we had a plan for the future. Absolutely important. We are now in the big league for the most political commodity on the planet, oil. Once you get into that league, we don't control it. It will control us. So the people that control that game will control us. And unless we have the ability to at least understand the game, we are going to be so played as is happening now. Just to give you an example, David spoke about 18 billion barrels of oil in reserve in Guyana. Just today in the newspaper, the CEO of Exxon said it's only 11 billion. But here's the story about that 11 billion. Every time, then there have been 6 discoveries since the first time it was announced to be 11 billion. So they've been discovering oil and discovering oil and discovering oil and discovering oil, and it's still 11 billion. You gotta be a genius to really accept that. But we don't have the capacity, and we have not even begun to address how we will have the capacity to actually determine exactly how much we have. Because the people who are in control of that enterprise, if they can come and tell us 11 billion and every find you say has been significant, then you understand where we are. So we say, let's agree those 5 areas. We also say that education is a national priority, and we have a disaster area in education. All of you here, collectively, whatever number of years we've left the country, collectively represent per capita far more capacity than we are producing in Guyana now and that is staying in Guyana now. None, or I should say very few, of the young people who are in Guyana now want to stay in Guyana. And that's an indictment on all of us, because how can you, at the prime of your life, just out of university, looking forward to your future and planning your future, what's going to happen to your kids, how they're going to get educated, what's happening in health, not want to stay in the country, and everybody else is trying to get into Guyana to take a piece of Guyana. It means we cannot even persuade our young people to stay there. That's a scary, scary place. And that comes down to many things, but perhaps most importantly for us now is the rule of law. Everybody knows that if you get from a traffic cop stopping you, all the way up to whether you want a contract, is a run-it. Your standard default position is to go to your pocket, either bribe the traffic cop, or go to your pocket to say part of the contract that you're going to get goes. It's so bad that the people who are collecting the bribe from the advance money from the contract are collecting it the same day they sign the contract and you cash it. So it's almost as if they are standing up outside of the bank waiting for you to cash the mobilization fee so they can collect their money. And there's no sense of national pride or national development. And I haven't even come to the discriminatory practices. And I don't want to spend any time there because I know you have questions for me. But I did a piece called Economy and Justice about 2 to 3 years ago. And the statistics are frightening. 5 out of 6 of the gold export licenses went to one ethnic group. 100% of the contracts in health, 100% went to one ethnic group. When you come to construction contracts, and this is 3 years ago, only 18% of the contracts actually went to people of African descent. Of course, in none of these awards does anything go to the indigenous. So we are creating a society on, most importantly, it showed that oil blocks of, other than the international oil companies that got awarded blocks for exploratory purposes. Not a single African got an oil block. The most important commodity for the future. But they had at least 4 to 5 oil blocks that had been awarded to a particular ethnicity, which, by the way, got traded at hundreds of millions of dollars. And recently, one of those companies traded in the Canadian Stock Exchange, couldn't even fulfill their basic requirements, and the question was, how did they get an oil block in the first place? But that's another discussion. But just think of the impact on the generations of persons who are not of that receiving class. There are children in Sophia who are still going to school with sugar water in the fastest growing economy. That's part of the 20% extreme food poverty. And you are in an ethnically divided society creating perhaps the seeds of what will probably at some stage be one of the most violent reactions against this level of ostracization to people. Don't want to make it dramatic, but we have, as nationals about Guyana, to stop that. The good thing is, there's no ideological difference between the parties. This is not the old days where we argue whether you're communist or you're socialist. The West has put us in a position that everybody is a liberal Democrat. What separates us is culture. And the culture of the People's Progressive Party is literally, it's a business. They run it as a business for their shareholders who are the members of that party. That's the end, the long and short of that story. We, the people who buy from them, until we say enough is enough, that business is going to continue. And so we say, amongst many things, that we have to establish the institutional framework, the Petroleum Commission, which will have to be peopled by experts who are not Guyanese, because we just don't have that history. We have to have a National Development Commission, again, significantly peopled by people who are not Guyanese, who have that experience. You can buy that talent with a plan to make sure Guyanese get there. And insofar as the billions that we have lost, we say, look, if we appoint Ms. Craval to investigate, you're going to hear, well, she's an African Guyanese female, therefore she's biased. If we appoint Mr. Singh, similar allegations. So we say, oh, that's fair. If we're missing $10 billion US, let's hire the best of the forensic experts internationally, because we got the money to do it, identify the prominent cases, and say to them, go find it, and throw in a sweetener. You get a whatever percentage commission, and let them produce the report. It removes all the allegations of ethnic violence. There are many other parts of our development program I can get to, but I know Melina says they're turfing us out here at 9 o'clock, which means we're going to have to start packing up in about 6 minutes, and I know people like Larry said he had some. 10. Okay. I know people like Larry said they have very difficult questions for me. And
2 pages.
2 pages of questions. 3 pages of questions.
But you have big writing.
I appreciate that.
I've told him to keep it to 1 page.
But I do, and all of you have got absolutely great memories of not only when you're in Guyana, but at some stage, the hope that you had for Guyana, which evaporated rapidly. And I know that in every household that is international, whether it's in the US, Canada, wherever it is, at some time during the day, Guyana comes up as a discussion. And it's perhaps because we are so tortured by our failure to actually make a real country out of the resources we had. Before 2015, before we got to oil, we had more resources per capita than anybody else in the Caribbean, including the Dominican Republic, including Cuba. Cuba, classic example. Sanctions from 1959 when Castro took over. Human resource development led it to a position where it was exporting and continues to export doctors, not only to the Caribbean, but to Africa. The only reason apartheid fell was because Cuba sent soldiers to South Africa, well, it was to Angola, to actually fight the South African army. They defeated them, and they retreated. And that's a country that was embargoed from 1959. So we have examples that if you have the will, and if you have the right policy where you concentrate your efforts on human development, the rest is going to fall into place. I'm not saying we want to be like Cuba, but we have less than 1 million people. And it's a human resource that we have to develop. Outside of Trinidad, Guyana is probably the only place people in the diaspora do not want to retire to. They don't feel safe, they don't feel comfortable. People from Barbados, they're all going back. Jamaica, with all its statistics, people retire to Jamaica. You pick your island in the English-speaking Caribbean, and people are going back. We, with 83,000 square miles, more minerals, rare earth, whatever you pick, we have, and we have never developed it. This is our time. There was a time when only one Guyanese got a scholarship and could go overseas to study. There was a time when very few Guyanese, several qualified, could get scholarships, and many didn't get scholarships and lived their entire life as a result of that disadvantage. We have the opportunity to rectify this now. And if you leave that cancer that is now in stage 4, called the People's Progressive Party, in office, you will not recognize the country in 2030. We will become, on paper, a very rich banana republic, but our own citizens, because of the educational system, because of the economic apartheid, will be sitting down, sweeping the streets, if they're lucky, watching other people drive on fancy infrastructure that was not built for them. I will take your questions, and I thank you very much.